Hello and welcome back. My name is Bill Mew.
And hi, I'm Des Blanchfield. Welcome back to the desk here at Elnion.com. We've got some great highlights to share with you. As always, we have some new articles. We've got some great content from Bill Mew with a piece around cybersecurity. Craig Mullins has put out a couple of articles around databases. I've put out a few pieces around the mainframe. But today we're going to dedicate our conversation around Elnion.com's highlights on the topic of AI. No great surprise that that's a big hot topic, but specifically around a piece of research that's come out where over 1,000 participants took part in a survey, and essentially looked at that whole challenge of what public perception and response to artificial intelligence and generative AI was versus the business response. Bill, why don't you kick us off on generally your thoughts around this big topic of the public perception and their acceptance of it versus the excitement we've seen in business, and then we'll dive into a few of the elements of the article.
Well, I think I turn back and I've got enough grey hair to remember when everyone trusted technology. It was great stuff. It worked. And then we went through a period more recently when suddenly people became far more aware of some of the dangers of technology in terms of privacy, in terms of surveillance and everything like that. And I think reflecting on this research, I think some of those elements have crept in terms of tempering public opinion.
And they have indeed, and to that very point, essentially the high-level takeaway from this, which we'll delve into as we go through today's conversation, is that the early fanfare, the excitement around essentially what we would refer to as generative AI, not just machine learning or machine intelligence, but an artificial intelligence that we can not only talk to and have a conversation with, but it can also generate content. And we've seen it with a lot of fun creating interesting images, unicorns with butterfly wings and so forth, or frogs flying through the sky, and using it to do our homework and so forth. But we've also seen at the other end of the spectrum where companies are very excited about the potential to, I guess, simplify and streamline and speed up processes, write a business case of something in seconds rather than 2 or 3 hours with a human. And so, what we wanted to cover today was just that I guess, segregation of the early hype from the media and the excitement where when we first saw this stuff come along and open AI was probably the first one with their ChatGPT offering, you signed up, you paid for it, and over 100 million people did that in a record time. They were recognized as a company that got the fastest onboarding and the fastest 100 million paid users to a particular thing. But that seems to have turned now, and Bill, I think you're going to be able to confirm this with regard to cloud computing's context, where pre-cloud computing, we could still have a dedicated server on-prem or in a data center of our own, or a third-party data center managed by a service provider, and we could install our own Microsoft software, Microsoft database engines, Microsoft mail servers, and so forth. That slowly was weaned away from us, and now we can only get those Microsoft services at a cloud service. But I'm keen to get your thoughts, Bill, with regard to that pivot now where we actually can't unbundle the AI element, and we never got to do a private AI element. It was just built in and baked in, and now we've got consumers reacting to this situation where, WhatsApp, for example, from Meta or Facebook, as it were, an update came out on the devices the other day, and there's a little pulsing circle, and it's just baked into the platform. You cannot opt out. It's always there, and you could ignore it, but it's full-blown generative AI.
Yeah, well, I think we're seeing a lot of parallels here between the move to cloud and the move to AI. To a large extent, both technologies existed for some time, and we had client-server architectures that had data centers and then a move to the cloud, and you could still have private cloud, and there were various different iterations. And I'd argue we're going to remain in a hybrid cloud environment for a long time yet. But one of the big things we saw, that in almost no time at all, that cloud was everywhere. There was cloud washing on every product and service. And I think we've seen the same with AI. There's been suddenly AI is everywhere. There's a lot of AI washing and a lot of people reinterpreting everything as AI. But one of the issues that we have here is there's been a far quicker transition to always AI and the inability to turn it off. And I don't know what you think the implications of that are, not only in terms of its ubiquity, but in terms of our trust of AI in general.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And in fact, I had a couple of conversations today by phone that thought that very thing up. And in fact, I remember when we were talking the other day, you yourself were having an argument with one of your smart agents on a speaker, I think it was, where you were trying to get it to shut up and stop playing music. And somewhere along the lines, it was hearing something and kept playing music for you to the point where you probably had to turn it off. So I think just to that point you raised very briefly, and I'd like to get your take on it as well, is that if you force something on people, they will naturally become wary of it and nervous about it. And when we think about the quick transition that's taken place with smartphones and the integration of smart agents, we think about AI in the form of, say, Siri in its early days. You could ask it the date and time and the weather and so forth, but now you can ask it more complex things, even to essentially checking messages or email. That was kind of weaned on us slowly, but now we've got the point where this intelligence is just being baked in, and it's happening overnight. And as I said, we can't turn it off. And I think there's just a lot of unknowns around here. Now, consider that trust element. And again, Bill, you've had some experience with this with regard to one of the larger social media networks where you were part of a consortium that took them to court and won, and brought about some changes with that. The idea of an always on, always integrated, always listening element in everything we do, whether it's AI washed tablet devices or personal computers, if they are there and listening and capturing data and shipping it off somewhere where we don't know where it is, and often the third parties don't even know where it is because it's such a large hyperscale environment, then that naturally brings in a concern around that privacy and trust, and I think it's warranted. I'm keen to get your thoughts, given that you live and breathe in the space as well in your part of the world.
Absolutely, but I think some of the thing here is the almost immediate move to always on and AI everywhere has taken a lot of people by surprise. And there are a lot of concerns about job losses and other elements to AI. I think, broadly speaking, AI will have a beneficial effect. A lot of that is being felt in the way that it has a massive augmented effect in our productivity. And we'll see as AI becomes better developed and there are better applications of it, it will be a net positive. But in any a transition, there are going to be groups who lose out in the short term. There'll be some job losses. People will be retrained and life and work will be different. But the overarching thing is not necessarily about jobs. It's about the level of surveillance that is possibly inherent in a lot of AI. Because if you've got an Alexa device, it's always listening. Now there are more and more devices with AI built in that are also always listening. And all of this data is being held somewhere. I wrote an article a while back about your Miranda rights. You have the right to be silent. And if you can choose not to comment if you're arrested. But the problem here is that they've actually been able, in many instances, to serve a warrant to get all of your Alexa information and everything that you've said. And therefore, if in a moment of frustration you said that you could possibly kill your wife, she was so frustrating, and then alarmingly she was found in a somewhat difficult state, then you might actually be regretting having an Alexa in the home, having actually recorded that. Not that I would suggest any of us are going to do that sort of thing. But things possibly said in jest, in frustration, you've lost our right to silence, and we're always being surveilled. And I think that is a general concern, especially as people have lost some of the trust that used to exist in technology.
Yeah, and we've seen that with, at the risk of getting in a bit of strife, the brand of security camera that you can essentially just tape or bolt to your front door, and it wirelessly connects to your network and home, and then streams out of the cloud. You've now got situations where a particular nation has made it law in most of its states where that data is actually available to law enforcement without warrant. Now, if you've, as you said, if you've come back in some circumstance that you may not necessarily want the world to know about, but that is not illegal, but could be, could paint you in a negative light, then that you've lost the right to protect that data, because that device just ships it off to the cloud. And if you take that data and it can be construed in such a way that you look like you've done something wrong, you actually have to fight to prove that you are in fact innocent, when the right to be considered innocent by default should be the norm. So I think, if I go back to our core point, which is, there was some great fanfare and excitement from consumers about what they could potentially do with generative AI, and rightly so. I think now there's a potential backlash where consumers are realizing that they've actually lost the right to choose access to these tools. And as you said, these smart agents of various forms, whether in our phone or intelligent cameras on our front doors, or indeed in our cars. And as you know all too well, you've written something about this recently, insurance companies are now being sold data from car manufacturers of your behavior as a driver, and that's being used against you with regard to your policies, and the cost of your insurance goes up without you knowing why. And it turns out it's because insurance companies are getting the data from the manufacturers who track the movement and behavior of you as a driver in the car. Drive erratically, your policy will go up. So yeah, I think it's an interesting time. I'd love us to wrap up on a couple of bullet points on this, if you don't mind. I'm going to come back to you in a second with a question, but I've got a couple I'll close on after that. So I think the question now we have is, have we reached a situation where we now need to build a moat between reasonable use of some of this intelligence and its applicability to various lifestyle choices, or has that horse bolted? Have we just lost that opportunity completely, and we're not going to put the proverbial genie back in the bottle, as they say? And more importantly, going back to your point around trust, and I'd love you to just wrap us up on this, is if that trust element has actually been eroded such that it can't be gotten back, then what does that actually mean? If you no longer trust your phone, if you no longer trust your fridge, if you no longer trust your car, what does that do from a business perspective when you're trying to sell products and services to consumers who actually come with the view that they can't trust it in the first place? What are your thoughts on that, Bill?
I think when you talk about lifestyle choices, you don't always have much choice. First of all, there's a limited range, and there are some services that you can only get that are on the cloud or that have AI, and there are no non-cloud or non-AI options. A bit like smartphones, it's very difficult to get a dumb phone these days. But also, it's not just your devices. If you're living in a street where the neighbour who lives immediately opposite you has one of these cameras on their doorbell, and that camera is always pointing at your house, it's not necessarily your device. And I happen to live in the UK where there are a lot of cameras anyway, and therefore there's a great level of surveillance. I think society has gone that way. We never voted for it. In fact, we voted against ID cards and all sorts of things because we didn't want surveillance. But my face here on cameras, whether my neighbour's doorbell or whether a lot of the public cameras or in shops or everywhere, that face has now become my identity because we have facial recognition and I'm being tracked everywhere. And going back to the Miranda rights, not only have I lost the right not to carry an identity card because of facial recognition, I've lost the right to remain silent. Those have gone away from us.
Yeah, in fact, it reminds me of a moment in Las Vegas a couple of years ago, pre-pandemic, as part of a keynote I was giving to an ocean of human beings. I referenced Google and I referenced Siri, and all these phones woke up, and we had 30,000 people freaking out because their pockets were vibrating. And I joked about the fact that we're probably at a point now where we not only have to put your phone on silent, but can you disable your smart agents on your phones? Because you got a room full of thousands of people and all their devices are asking you if you are asking them a question. It gets quite raucous. So what I'd like to leave everyone with today, and again, thank you everyone for joining us here at the desk at elnion.com for our highlights conversation between myself and Bill. I'd like everyone to join us on various platforms, whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook Business. Post your thoughts with regard to both sides of this coin. As a consumer of services in various forms, how do you feel about this level of intelligence being baked into things, whether it's an AI PC, whether it's your smartphone, or whether it's just an app like WhatsApp that you get an update and you do not get to choose whether that generative AI intelligent bot and chatbot and so forth is baked in. It just arrives. You get this pulsating circle. It's there, and rather hauntingly. And on the other side of the spectrum, in business, what are your thoughts with regard to how organizations should respond to this? What are some of the biggest challenges that you think they're going to face in the next 12 to 18 months as consumers start looking at these things in the context of, what is being collected, where is that data going to, how can I respond to it? And in very many ways, it's kind of like that right to be forgotten that the EU fought for. Bill, fantastic conversation. I think we're going to continue this online through Twitter and LinkedIn and other platforms. Would love everyone to put their questions forward. Let's kick this thing off. It's a big topic, and I suspect we're going to bring it back to the desk another time soon. But thanks everyone joining us, and Bill, another great conversation.
And again, I'll look forward to the next one too.
Thanks, Bill.